A South Philly stoop in 1976 wasn't just a place to sit, it was the front line of a city, rewriting its own rules. While the country paraded through Independence Hall for the Bicentennial, local families fought white flight with Saturday morning scrub brushes and hoagies from the corner deli. What really defined Philadelphia in the 1970s was grit and pride, and neighborhoods that refused to vanish. That still leaves us asking why this rough city stayed so uniquely real when others changed forever. Blocks in Philadelphia during the 1970s were more than just a collection of row homes. They were living, breathing communities with their own codes and rhythms. The city's signature was the narrow brick row house, lined up shoulder to shoulder, each with a set of marble steps out front. Those steps were not just for show. Every Saturday morning you would see neighbors out with buckets and brushes, scrubbing the marble until it shined. It did not matter if you were in South Philly, Fishtown, or the Northeast. Keeping your stoop spotless was a badge of pride, a silent message to anyone passing by. Blocks meant you take care of your own. Inside, the story continued. Walk through a front door, and you would find floral wallpaper, wood paneling, shag carpet, maybe a couch wrapped in plastic to keep it looking new for company. Living rooms doubled as gathering spots for family, friends, and neighbors, especially in winter when the block's social life moved indoors. In summer, though, the real action was outside. Porches and stoops became command centers. Kids played stickball or hopscotch in the street while adults kept watch, trading stories, warnings, and gossip. The block captain, sometimes just a respected neighbor, kept things organized, rallying folks for cleanups and watching out if trouble started brewing. A row home in the early 1970s cost between $15,000 and $25,000, but the real value was in the sense of belonging. Each block had its own flavor. South Philly's Italian roots, Fishtown's Irish bars, West Philly's mix of old and new, Mount Airy's leafy calm, and the Northeast's newer developments. No matter where you landed, the block defined you. It was a world where everyone knew your name, your business, and if you needed it, had your back. Saturday mornings on 9th Street meant the Italian market in full swing. Vendors shouted prices, produce stacked high, the smell of garlic and onions hung in the air. Old-timers haggled over sausage links while kids eyed the cannoli. It wasn't just shopping, it was a ritual. You would grab fresh rolls, maybe a hunk of provolone, and catch up on neighborhood gossip while waiting for your number at the butcher. Every family had their favorite spot, but everyone agreed the market was the city's pantry. On the walk home, corner delis called out with hoagies, shredded lettuce, oil, sharp provolone, and just the right amount of hot peppers. Some swore by Sarcones, others by Primos, but the debate over who made the best ran deep. For lunch, it might be a cheesesteak, the grease soaking through the paper, Pat's or Gino's. That argument could last all night, and nobody ever really won. The line at Pat's wrapped around the block after midnight, and Gino's neon-lit-up passionk like a carnival. In the end, you picked your side and stuck with it. Snacks were everywhere. A soft pretzel twisted from a street cart, still warm, or a Tastykake butterscotch krimpet tucked into a lunchbox. After school, kids hit up the corner store for penny candy or a cup of water ice in the summer heat. These foods weren't just meals, they were part of the city's identity, as Philly as the accent or the attitude. Eating in Philadelphia was about loyalty, about roots, about knowing where your John came from and who made it best. Factories that once kept Philly humming started shutting their doors. General Electric, Westinghouse, Bud Company, even the mighty naval shipyard, one by one they cut shifts and handed out pink slips. In the early 1970s, a union job on the line brought in $12,000 to $18,000 a year. Not a fortune, but enough to cover the mortgage on a row home, keep Tastykakes in the lunchbox, maybe put a kid through Catholic school. Suddenly, those paychecks dried up. In Kensington and Fishtown, men who had clocked in for decades at Bud or General Electric found themselves on the street, union cards in their wallets, nowhere to punch in. The hiring halls grew tense. Guys crowded around bulletin boards hoping for a scrap of news, a rumor of new work. Unemployment lines stretched down the block. Bills piled up on kitchen tables lined with plastic, and the sense of security that came with a steady job vanished. The city's industrial backbone was buckling, and families who had built their lives on factory work were left to wonder what was coming next. Frank Rizzo's name carried weight in every corner bar and union hall from South Philly to the Northeast. He started out as police commissioner, then took over City Hall as mayor in 1972. For some, Rizzo was the only thing standing between their families and the chaos they saw on the news. Crime was up, jobs were vanishing, and people wanted someone who would be tough and back it up. His campaign rallies drew crowds of working folks, waving signs and chanting his name, convinced he would keep their blocks safe. But there was another side. In black neighborhoods, Rizzo's police were a threat, not a comfort. Raids, street stops, and public strip searches left scars that did not fade. Protesters filled the streets, demanding an end to police brutality, holding up signs that called out City Hall. Rizzo's style, loud, unfiltered, unbending, split the city down the middle. He won re-election in 1975, proof that plenty of Philadelphians backed his law and order message. But every new headline about a police beating or a housing fight deepened the divide. People argued about him at dinner tables and on stoops, each side certain they saw the real Philadelphia. The city's daily grind, whether you felt protected or whether you felt targeted, depended a lot on which block you called home. Getting around Philly in the 1970s meant dealing with a daily grind that wore folks down. SEPTA tokens started the decade at a quarter, but by 1979 they had jumped to 40 cents, a real bite out of a paycheck when every dollar counted. For a lot of families, especially in row house neighborhoods, public transit was not a choice. It was the only way to get to work or school. Buses and trolleys rattled along Broad Street and Market, packed with riders clutching their transfers, hoping the next fare hike would not hit too soon. Out on the streets, the gas crises of 1973 and 1979 brought everything to a crawl. Lines snaked around corner stations, drivers waiting hours just to fill up. Some days, pumps ran dry by noon. Tempers flared and car horns echoed off the row homes. As wages stagnated and jobs vanished, even the act of getting across town felt like a test. Graffiti spread along subway cars and station walls, a sign of frustration and pride mixed together. Trash piled up on curbs when city services lagged, turning daily commutes into obstacle courses. But people kept moving, walking, riding, waiting, because that is what Philly did. The city never stopped, no matter how rough the ride got. The city shook with every Flyers goal in 1974 and 1975. Back-to-back, Stanley Cups turned South Philly into a sea of orange and black, Bobby Clark's toothless grin plastered on every kid's bedroom wall. Veterans Stadium, fresh in 1971, was a concrete monster where the Phillies, the Eagles, and Army-Navy games all thundered under one roof. It didn't matter if you sat in the 700 level or down by the dugout, every seat was a front row to heartbreak or glory. On WIP, callers argued about trades, cursed out coaches, and declared undying loyalty, all before breakfast. But Philly's sound wasn't just in the stands. Gamble and Huff laid down lush, soulful tracks at Philadelphia International Records, with the O'Jays and Teddy Pendergrass spinning love and heartbreak into gold. The city's pulse was a mix of slap shots, stadium roars, and that unmistakable Philly groove. In 1976, the whole country turned its eyes to Philadelphia. Tall ships from around the world crowded the Delaware River, sails snapping in the July heat. The Freedom Festival stretched for days, drawing millions. Estimates ran as high as 2 million just for the main events. Independence Mall was scrubbed spotless, the Liberty Bell got a shiny new pavilion, and Penn's Landing finally looked like something out of a travel brochure. The city spent over $50 million on facelifts, fresh paint, polished bricks, and a few new museums for good measure. For a week, it felt like Philly was the center of the universe, all bunting and brass bands. But just a few blocks from the crowds, the cracks showed. Factories still sat empty, row homes still sagged, and the only fireworks some neighborhoods saw were the kind that came with sirens. The city wore its colonial costume for the cameras, but underneath it was still all grit and grind. Today, as neighborhoods shift and old factories become condos, Philly's grit still runs deeper than any facelift. Authenticity built in hard times does not fade with redevelopment. In a city where every block tells its own story, the real Philadelphia never lets you forget what it took to survive.